even if you have no interest in Superman, this score is worth listening to because Hans Zimmer just kills it, and it feels amazing.
Can I take that further?
Yes.
If you have no interest in Superman, you should still watch this movie because it's one of the best superhero movies we've had.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our inaugural episode of this movie review podcast.
Unnamed.
We are so unnamed at this moment. You'll have clicked on it at this point and we'll have chosen a name, but as of right this
Hopefully.
second, otherwise we're just unnamed movie review podcast. Maybe that's the name we'll go with.
Three ding-dongs.
Three ding-dongs talking into a mic late at night. We actually just came from a movie.
Mm-hmm.
We went and saw The Northman in theaters. And I wanted to start off our podcast just talking about The Northman. But before you give a take on The Northman, I'd like you to introduce yourself and then give like a 2 to 3 sentence thing of things you liked and disliked about The Northman.
Okay.
So let's start on my left with Zach.
Okay, I'm Zach, as you just said. And I liked the cinematography a lot. It was a beautifully shot movie. I liked the story. One thing that I always look for in a movie is what is the story? What is the movie trying to say about life or about morality? And I thought the story was really good. We haven't discussed if we're going to do spoilers or not yet on this podcast. We probably should do that eventually.
Yes.
But I think we should too. Can we just go for it?
I'm not.
Can we
I'm
just
not
go for
gonna
spoilers,
talk
guys?
without-
Do 3 comments and then we'll do like a spoiler section where people can fast forward through it.
And
if
we
they
can,
want
okay,
to.
and we'll
I'm
put
gonna
like the
spoil
times
it.
in it.
Don't spoil.
Not on purpose.
You're
It's just
going
going
to
to
lose us
happen.
listeners before we even start having
I
listeners.
can't
Jake.
self-regulate that well.
Okay, but anyway, so my 3 thoughts. Beautifully shot movie. Iceland is phenomenally gorgeous. It captured the country really well. It was really awesome. I liked that it was a very accurate movie. Like you could see the Vikings and it didn't, the parts of it that were like suspension of disbelief, I thought were things that the Vikings really believed in. And the director kind of left it up to your idea of like, is this really happening? Is this what they believe? And I thought that was good. And then the story was really good. And I thought the moral of the story was well done. I thought it shared some truth, which I always enjoy. And so I liked those 3 parts about it.
Hot take on thing they could have done better.
I could have to take yours. More boats.
More boats.
I think they could have done a little bit more showing how brutal the Vikings were. The Vikings were pagan.
More violence is what you're
Well, no,
asking for.
not more violence. I did not want to
Sorry.
watch too much more violence.
Burning a bunch of children in a home wasn't brutal
That
enough
was
for you.
awful. That was awful.
Sorry, spoiler already.
But it starts with that. And then once they do that, they're kind of done showing how awful they were
They're
sometimes.
like, here's the line, and
They're
we
like-
went right up to it, and now we're going to leave it
yeah,
alone.
then they're like, okay, you saw it. But
I have a reason why that's actually an important scene. I'll say it later.
No, it's a super important scene. And I think that one thing about the Vikings is that when they were pagans, and they were pagans at one point, they did a lot of awful, brutal, evil things. And they did a good job at the beginning showing that, but then they didn't show any more of it really. And I don't know. I feel like it's tough sometimes because I don't want to get the view. And one thing I get annoyed at by movies is when they have a protagonist that does something awful and terrible, and they're just kind of like, but he's better now. It's okay. I'm like, he still did those really awful, horrible things.
Yeah.
This is why I hated
And-
that Pablo Escobar show because they turned him into this like
Saint that you
Oh,
wanted
really?
to like.
Okay.
he's
See-
like the protagonist, and it's like this person is awful.
Yeah. And
And
so
you're like watching it, and you're like, I'm watching. I'm like, I'm not being portrayed that this man is evil.
yeah. And that's the one thing is it's not that I wanted more brutality because I did not enjoy watching those scenes, but I do think if you want to make it accurate and if you want to show what they did as pagans and the evil, awful things they did, I think you have to have some of that and be like reminding that, hey, these people had a different sense of belief, a different sense of morality. And because of it, they did things that are pretty objectively awful.
All right, so we've heard Zach's opinion on the Northman. Let's the other delicious voice in your ears with the mustachio wonder
weird.
himself. Chase, why don't you introduce yourself and give us some takes on the Northman?
I'm Chase. I saw The Northman twice now.
This
I
was your
cheated.
second time.
Oh, yeah.
It was an accidental not accident, but me and my wife went on a date and we were going to see something else, and it was just I didn't pre-plan, and it was the only thing we could see in the time frame for babysitters. So I was like, sorry guys, I'm going to see. I'm actually really glad I saw it twice. I really liked it a lot more the second time. I'll say what I didn't like first,
'Kay.
especially the first time I saw it, that I think bummed me out the rest of the movie, and then I was over it. But the second time is him cutting his hair bothered me.
Okay.
Because I don't know. It was very Viking. His like long hair,
Right.
and then he like chops it, and then they cut it even shorter, and he just looks kind of dumb.
The progression through the movie, it just gets shorter and shorter
and then,
shorter.
Yeah, like as he's it has like 3 forms. His final form is like his boyhood haircut.
Yes.
And it's just like he starts out when he's grown as this berserker, which is one of the things I loved is that they used the berserker title, which if anyone's watched the Vikings show, Ragnar's son Bjorn goes out into the forest for a while to like become a man, and these like rival Vikings send a berserker for him, and he first kills a bear, and then after he kills the bear, this berserker like ambushes him and he like kills him in an amazing fashion. But they don't really explain like what a berserker is. It's the only berserker named in that show that's like 7 seasons long. And so you're like, oh, cool, a berserker. I don't know what that is. And then they show you this pack of berserkers in this movie where they're like that.
They're nuts.
they're like nuts. They're the kind of these like more, they're like the shock troops. They're like animalistic. They're probably on some psychedelics while they're sitting there in the rain chanting and like it's like this weird boys club. It's almost comical. I loved it. Like that scene again, watching that scene for the second time I love it. And then they go just raid that village, and it's a pretty cool scene. But I love that. Yeah, I know. I with you that this is the 3rd movie I've seen by Robert Eggers, and all his movies are beautiful. He's really good at his, like all the camera work and sound too, like the soundtrack or whatever like noise he's using, sound and music and the mix of them. But yeah, they always look good. So
yeah.
And my name's Jesse. I will be the host for this unnamed, untitled movie review podcast. But some of my takes, I come from a more technical background. So I am always looking for, how did they shoot that? Things like that. And I just thought the use of lighting was really gorgeous in this. Like the cinematography, obviously gorgeous. They have Iceland as their background. So, I mean, you throw a camera out in the middle of the field and get some pretty shots
it's
there.
a good place.
But they just use lighting so effectively to hide some things. There's a nudity scene after a sex scene, basically, and I thought it was one of the most tasteful, like fully nude scenes I've ever seen lit in a way that it's like it didn't really show anything, but at the same time it kind of left it to your interpretation. It was just like gorgeous. It should have been like a painting. So I thought that was really intriguing. The way they utilize light to hide things and show things in different points. I think overall, the violence that they did show wasn't just for shock factor, which is what I really appreciated, because for the most part, it's like, I'm not huge into just watching violence occur on screen just for the sake of having violence on screen to like get things exciting. But it's every piece of violence they showed felt motivated for the most part. And even some of the really gory stuff they showed wasn't just there, I think, for shock value. It made sense. Zach and I were talking briefly before we started. There's a whole thing where he kind of dismembers people and puts them up in a thing. And it's sort of, it makes sense motivationally for the character to do that. Not
makes
just
a horse mural.
Yeah, he makes a horse mural. He's doing his own art, right?
He's really just an artist.
He's just he just is an artist that doesn't know how to show his
Express.
art. And, yes. But I thought that made sense because they're at this point in the thing, they're under the impression that they're being haunted by like some spirits. So this kind of like crazy horse mural of dismembered body parts makes sense. So if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, we've said a lot of things in the last probably 7 minutes that probably sound absolutely insane. But
it's about before
we give a quick like see it, don't see it kind of a review, we're going to go into some spoilers. I mean, we've kind of lightly touched on spoilers, but I want to give us a chance to talk about some of the end stuff. So if you don't want to hear about spoilers, in the show notes, we'll put a point where we start talking about our next topic, which is Man of Steel. So if you don't want spoilers for The Northman, go ahead and skip to that timestamp that's in the show notes. So let's dive into some spoiler territory. Zach, you said you had some thoughts on some of the stuff that was a little more spoilery at the end.
Yeah. He dies, and it was awesome because he totally deserved it. As Chase said, He doesn't directly do it, but he helps raid the village, and then they round up all the kids and put them in a shack and burn them alive, which is pretty awful.
Yeah.
They're taking people into slavery. I'm assuming they're raping people because, guys
Probably.
who do that probably aren't very oh no, consent.
Consent's a big deal for me.
I don't think consent was a big deal for the Vikings.
Or for, they didn't get consent
890
coming
AD.
into
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, he was a participant in that, and it's, it doesn't show him really doing that directly. He's only involved in the battle scenes, but he was still supporting that.
Didn't seem very remorseful.
No, he didn't really seem like he's like, oh no. What's that meme? He was like, oh no. Anyway, he's just like, yeah, I don't really care.
It's kind of glazed over.
Yeah.
It's just these.
And then the decision he has to make. He has to make a decision, and it's a great part. It's a good scene, and he's kind of fallen in love with one of the other slaves that he's been on the farm with, basically. And they've been together, and they're escaping together. And then they get on a boat. They're ready to leave Iceland. They're ready to go and hide themselves and take care of everything and live their own lives. And then he says there was a prophecy, and you see this prophecy early in the movie, that he could either be kind to his kin or hate his enemies, and he had to choose one, and he chose to hate his enemies. He leaves her.
Well, he says he chooses both.
Yeah, that's called denial.
That's him being selfish and not
that's called
wanting to
lying
make a
to
choice.
yourself.
The movie definitely ends with him hating his enemies.
Yes, exactly. He's like, I'm being kind. No, you're
Grand
not.
Viking fashion.
Yeah, and he goes and he fights his
Naked?
enemy. Naked too, yes. Great part. No, but
They're both
he
naked.
goes, which is very interesting. Gotta love the Vikings. But yeah, he goes. He chooses to hate his enemies. He goes back. He kills the rest of them, and then he dies fighting his biggest enemy, the one he hates the most, the one who killed his father. He goes back. He kills all of that man's, all of his people, and sets his slaves free. Kills the murderer of his father's uncle. He kills his uncle's wife, which is actually also his mom. And then also the son that his mom has, so his half brother.
Should have been standing there.
Yeah. But he kills
It
all
was
of
a
them.
little accidental. I think he felt bad about that one.
I did think he felt bad about that one,
Yeah.
but he still put himself in the position to do that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he still killed them all.
Oh, yeah.
And then he died fighting, which I thought was appropriate because to me, it makes the story that if you're consumed by revenge, if you follow fate, it will lead you to your death. Or as opposed to he had the opportunity. And even in the fates, it said he would have the option, and he did not choose the option to go and live and build a family. And I think that's the true option. That's the more manly option. So he kind of wimped out, I would say.
Chase, thoughts in Spoiler Town?
Yeah, well, I thought this movie did a really cool inversion thing on you because when it starts out, he's a boy. He sees his, he's like the king's son. You think they're a happy family. You see, I love the scene where it's goofy because it's like this weird pagan king prince ritual where they're like crawling around, barking like dogs, burping and farting with Willem Dafoe cackling at them. But I'll never be able to wrestle with my son again without thinking of that. But I liked it because of that too, because while they are doing some weird pagan ritual, it's also a father and son being really silly, which is awesome. And everyone should, if you have kids, you should be silly with your kids.
Yes.
And so I like that scene a lot. But then, he sees his dad get killed. His village gets half slaughtered at least. And then he cuts to him being this adult berserker, and he's living the Viking life. Then they get all these slaves. They're going to ship them out, and he realizes they're going to his uncle, so he decides to sneak in as a slave. He brands himself, which was pretty badass. Cool. Sorry.
I like how he talked to the brand too.
Yeah.
It's like,
But they do this inversion on you where you find out that actually his mom helped plot the whole thing when he confronts her, and all of a sudden, and his uncle says something really interesting. He says, "Oh, you're just like your father. Evil begets evil." He learns from or at least hears from his mom and his uncle that his dad was not the dad that he thought, the person he thought he was. He was so young. There's a lot that he didn't see, and it's really interesting. That's why I think that scene with the burning the kids, when he's all of a sudden you look back at the earlier in the movie, and you're like, he is evil. Now you're posed this kind of dilemma where you're like, well, is he the good guy or is he not?
what was really cool about that scene with his mom and his uncle and how his mom helped plot it that's kind of a trope now, you know? Like I kind of went in and I was like, that mom was definitely in on it. She was definitely part of it.
And she talks about, I mean, there's a whole thing where he's like, oh, I thought I needed to save you. You were screaming. And even when that scene was playing the first time through, it shows her screaming as he carrying. I'm like, she sounds like she's laughing.
Yeah.
And then later,
she's like,
admits,
she was so happy. She was so excited. So but second that's time the start watching of that trope. That's the start of that trope, though, because we look at it, we're like, oh, it's so unoriginal. This movie is the inspiration for Hamlet, and it's kind of the start of that trope. This story is, so that was also cool to see with the inversion.
That was one of the things I was listening for the second time when she's getting carried away, because and she does barely. You can hear her kind of like cackle, like laugh. They kind of play it.
They soften it.
They soften it, and she is kind of sounds like she's screaming. It's kind of. I was really listening for it the second time, so it's a little ambiguous, and then you do hear her kind of laugh a little bit. Right. But if you don't know, you won't catch it. So.
Yeah. I think Nicole Kidman, great crazy mom character.
We haven't seen her in a while.
Yeah, Nicole
Kidman, great crazy character. In
honestly, didn't even know she was in this movie because I didn't watch any trailers for this. The only thing I knew was that Anya Taylor-Joy was in it because YouTube had some interview where they were talking to her about how cold it was up there when they were filming. And that was the only thing I knew. Was
like when he's swimming in the ocean.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
They
that
actually
so
went
cool.
and swam in the ocean. And so, it's like Nicole Kidman plays crazy mom who has some weird incest thing going on. Very odd.
Incest? What do you mean?
When she's making out with her son.
Oh, that part, yes. I selectively forgot that part because that was
a
super
moment.
weird.
I don't think there was a track record of it, but it was definitely a moment of it.
But that was just.
She went from a dad to an uncle. I mean, she's got kind of a thing for her.
But didn't she try to kill him right after that or something?
Yeah,
I got a little confused. I couldn't tell if she was trying to murder him or he was just trying to pull away because there was a physical altercation right after
there
the
was
kiss,
something.
And I couldn't tell if it was she was trying to stab him or if he was get away from me.
I felt like she was just messing with him because right after that he pulls away and she's totally cackling at him.
I think she was just trying to I don't think she was incestuous. I think she was just trying to use it to
do whatever.
I don't know what her plan was, but I feel like it was a more strategic thing than because she also talked about she felt Amleth, that's the main character. She said his father did not love her, but his uncle, who she was now with, did. Right. So I do think she actually loved him, and that was how she saw it. But, still killing your own child is probably not a good plan to put forward.
Yeah, she's definitely not a good guy.
No, she's not a good guy. The uncle's not a good guy.
There's not really any good people in this.
There's not. Can we talk, though?
That's pretty Viking. Yeah.
There was one character I was a little confused by. And Jesse and I talked a little about this, so I want to talk about it with Chase, too. What about the character played by Anya Taylor-Joy? Her name was Olga. What was...
the easiest name to pronounce in this movie, by the way.
I was confused by her. Because I get that she wanted to escape, but she seemed to latch onto him pretty quick. Is it just because he was big and ripped? Is that
he is very jacked in this movie? It needs to be known that he is very ripped
massive.
Do you guys watch Vikings, the show?
No.
I've watched it all almost twice now. I've been rewatching it.
He's the most well-known Viking lore master.
Well, I mean,
our resident Viking.
I can't make a claim about how accurate that show is per se.
Isn't it on the History Channel?
Yes.
There you go.
Everything you see on the History Channel is completely accurate.
Ancient aliens.
What I was going to say is their culture was definitely different. And at least in that show also, I mean, relationships are not fluid, almost fluid if they want it to be. And it's
the women are more willing to just latch on real quick.
And a lot of it is on the women to choose. They just will leave a guy for another guy.
Well, back
and there's
then
always
you
people
want to be with whoever the strongest.
And the
person
culture,
is for safety,
he was
right?
the strongest.
And the culture is just full of violence in general. So he had just helped slaughter her village.
Yeah, that part was a little weird.
And horrible things. But now she's a slave. But she's also this kind of witch character. Yeah. And which is funny because she was in his first movie, The Witch. She's
really?
The main character,
okay.
Yeah. But anyway, she's kind of this witch. So they got weird stuff that I can't explain going on in their heads. She's seen symbols or signs in him or something. That's what I kind of took from it.
Well, and what I liked about this is, I mean, they didn't get so abstract that you lost track of what was happening in the plot. Zach and I went and saw Green Knight whenever that was out in theaters forever ago. And like about the middle, we both leaned over each other and were like, do you know what's going on? And I'm like, no idea. And
We were both like taxing everything. We were like, okay, thinking about fantasy stuff and thinking about like all the artistic. And I was like, I have no idea. We just had, it was,
At least
so-
it was
so
a
weird.
beautiful movie.
yeah. And again, beautiful movie.
Yeah.
But this one, even when things got a little weird, because there's some stuff that is a little abstract that you can kind of try to interpret. There's a whole scene where he fights a zombie, but then maybe he didn't fight the zombie. It's unsure. But it doesn't like hurt the movie. Like you don't go, okay, I need to know what happened there. It was just like, okay, I'm not sure what happened there,
Well,
but it doesn't distract me from the rest of the plot. Like I still have a handle on where
Yeah.
we're going.
And the one last thing I would want to talk about the movie, if there's other things we can talk about those too, but the one last thing I would want to talk about the movie is that supernatural element, because we don't have a lot of experience in our culture with paganism.
Right.
Paganism is something that it kind of really started to die a slow death when Jesus came around. It was really interesting. Before,
As they say in the movie, what is it? The guy
oh gosh, that was hilarious. They were talking about, so after they think an evil spirits come, they're like, is it the Christian swine? Like they're like, their God is a corpse nailed to a tree. And they were talking about it with such fear. And I was like, yeah, my God's cool.
This is as they're staring at the corpses of two bodies that he nailed up on the side of the building in the shape
Yeah.
of a horse.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it was kind of cool to see like them, but they might have thought like Christians were originally thought to be cannibals because of the communion,
Right.
Drink his blood, eat his flesh.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk about the supernatural and the paganism in the movie, because I thought not only did they do a good job showing that they believed in the paganism, and they talk about Odin a little bit, which is not the Odin from Marvel quite.
No.
A little bit different.
No Anthony Hopkins in this
Little bit
movie.
more
if
violent.
You're looking for Anthony Hopkins, you're
Yeah.
going to miss out.
A little bit more violent Odin than Marvel's Odin, but
Yes.
But Fat Thor.
yes. Oh gosh, don't get me started. But anyway, what did you think about the displays of paganism? Because they did kind of do the thing where it's like, did he really fight the zombie? Did he not? Is it really like, is he just kind of crazy? Does he believe these things that are really, really odd, and so he thinks this way, or is this really happening? What was your guys' interpretation or thoughts on the paganism that they had in the movie?
I mean, I thought most of the time when we saw it the most, it was usually under the influence of psychedelics.
That's true.
So, but it did feel like, I thought they portrayed it well, where it was like when the stuff was happening, it felt like they were never freaked out by it. So it felt like part of their culture, or like it was an expected
Their
thing.
beliefs.
Like,
It's
yeah,
what
they
they
never
believed
came
in.
out of these psychedelic trips going, oh my gosh, what just happened to me? They were like, oh, Odin talked to me, or
They're like,
whatever.
oh, okay,
right?
Odin.
Yeah, and so it's like, it's an interesting way of just viewing it. Like, I mean, there's a lot of blood and like sacrificing and things of that nature, where we look at it today and we're like, why would you be sacrificing people as a thing? But that was a viewpoint that they had.
That's what they did, yeah.
They were not materialists.
Correct.
They lived very much in a spiritual world. And it's actually something we could probably take a cue from.
Yeah. Maybe
In our-
not the
in our-
sacrificing the
No.
people thing, but
No.
We should not sacrifice women
they
to get
live-
the evil spirits to go away. I will say that.
In their theology, their pagan theology, I mean,
Yeah.
they lived in a very spiritual world. They saw their gods in everything.
right.
They were very in tune with it. All the animals, things, in nature. I mean, that's how they live, and Christians should live the same way.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to take a last thing before we move on from the Northman, because I do want to get to our primary topic, but the Northman was fun to talk about, so we wanted to talk about it. So let's do a rating system of go see it in theaters, watch it streaming, or you don't need to see it at all. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
you got three options. What is your rating recommendation for people that are maybe interested in the Northman? Go see it in theaters, watch it at home when it comes out, or
I would recommend going and seeing it based a little bit on your movie preferences. It's a beautifully shot movie. The lighting is excellent. So if you're at home, you're not going to capture the noise and the sound. You're not going to capture quite the impressiveness of the camera work or the lighting. You're not going to be able to appreciate that. So if only it's kind of like Dune, you could totally stream it. You'd get the story, you'd get the basic parts, but it was really good to see it in a theater. And I haven't streamed Dune as much as I loved that movie, because I feel like I just couldn't capture it the same way it was in the theater. And so I'd say it goes, if it's your kind of thing, if it's something you're interested, if you don't like gore at all, just no, like period, don't see it. The gore is used for the story in a really good way, so I was okay with it. But if you just can't handle it at all, don't go see it. It's a serious movie, so if you're really into Marvel fun,
It's not a rom-com.
Yeah, it's not a rom-com. So if you're really into like the Marvel up and beat fun stuff, and you don't like anything but that, you're not going to like it. But if you appreciate serious movies, if you appreciate movies as art a little bit, then definitely go see it because it's gorgeous. It is. I mean, even just to see it and see the beauty and see, how those people would have looked like, how they would have lived in some ways, really well done. Really well done for that.
Chase, thoughts as the person who's seen it the most times in theaters?
I don't really have anything to add to what Zach said. That's basically what I was going to say. Like
Okay.
for the visuals and the sound, you should definitely, if it interests you, go see it in a theater. Same thing
So
with the
the-
gore.
the
The gore is used intentionally. It's definitely not an action movie.
Yeah.
There is action in it, but it's not the primary purpose of the movie. It's definitely a serious, like more dramatic movie with some action that's cool. But it's if you're looking for like a kind of crazy action, like it's not Troy or 300.
Nothing is
it's
Troy.
Yeah, well, I just mean it's not giant Viking battles.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah.
It's everything's intentional in it.
Mm.
So when it uses violence and stuff, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
But
So if it's something
It's
that
good.
would interest you, it sounds like we're in agreement that if you're going to see it and you're interested in the movie, go see it in theaters. That's the
Yeah.
preferred viewing experience. Doesn't mean you can't watch it streaming when it comes out later, but you'll probably enjoy it more if that's like your kind of movie by seeing it in theaters. So I want to move on to our other topic in the what I think I'm going to call this as Daddy Issues, a review of Northman and Man of Steel.
Yes. Yes, please.
That's the title I just came up with right now. But we want to, this was kind of going to be our primary chunk on this. And we are reviewing 2013 Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which is obviously about Superman. And at this point, I mean, it's been out almost 10 years. I don't feel like spoilers are
If you
a
haven't
thing
seen
at
it
this
yet,
point.
that's on you.
Yes, that really is on you. But what I kind of want to do is just talk through some of the things we love the most about this. We don't really have like segments or anything, but I want it to be a little bit fluid. The thing I want to start with the most, and the thing that I actually think is one of my favorite things about this movie, is the musical score by Hans Zimmer. Yeah. The musical score by Hans Zimmer, like I used to have this soundtrack when this movie came out on repeat, just in the background, because it is like so good. Hans Zimmer just like knocked it out of the park. And I mean, Hans Zimmer's Hans Zimmer. Everything he does, he is basically
It's
magic.
good. It's
but
good.
it's like just even rewatching it this morning, the whole time, it's like every time that main theme comes in, or the scene where he's taking his first flight, like you just like feel the tension. Like Hans Zimmer.
well, the shots in the movie complement the music.
Yes, and I mean, and the shots exist, and then Hans looks at him and goes, "Okay, here, I'm going to write some music for it." But the fact that he's like, just can capture everything, and there's this like this chord progression of like dun dun, and this thing, it's like so subtle. It's not the old school Superman theme where it's like, really high and like, just like so like. Happy-go-lucky.
So is the musical score better than Superman Returns from 2005?
Yeah, I would say yes. And we are going to talk about all of the old Supermans at some point during this discussion. I have that in my notes of things I want to talk about. But I do just want to like shout out right at the top. I think even if you have no interest in Superman, this score is worth listening to because Hans Zimmer just kills it, and it feels amazing.
Can I take that further?
Yes.
If you have no interest in Superman, you should still watch this movie because it's one of the best superhero movies we've had. When it first came out,
It's my favorite.
I loved it. And when I rewatched it, I forgot how good it was. I first watched it in theaters a long time ago, and I don't know if I'm off on this. I remember it being something that was a little controversial, and there was a good segment of people who didn't like it
because of how gritty it was. This is post, and this is also my notes of things I want to talk about. But this is probably a good transition into it. Sorry to cut you off.
That's fine. Go
is
for it.
DC Comics like fourth installment of we're doing the gritty thing. Marvel's going like, hey, witty banter, Joss Whedon, all this stuff.
Lots of color.
Yeah, and DC's like, okay, well, if they're doing that, we should not do that. So we're going to do the gritty reboot. So we had Batman Begins, we had Dark Knight, And then this comes in, I think, I would have to double check, but I think this comes in before Dark Knight Rises. So it's like
probably
kind
around
of,
the same time.
kind of in the middle of
Yeah,
that thing
yeah.
where they're just like, okay, everything's gonna be good. And so this is something that we're probably going to touch on multiple times in this, but I think the biggest controversial was that Superman kills Zod at the end of this,
Which
right?
was perfect. Like, I mean,
Which makes sense in our heads,
Yeah.
but it's always been Superman and Batman don't kill people. Like, that's a principle, which is why those people are constantly and that comes from the comic books, which actually comes from, did you know Batman used to kill people in the comic books?
like when he first started, I think
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yes. So the original Detective Comics, Batman used to kill people. And then there was this Concerned Parents of America that formed the Comic Authority Board.
It was mothers.
It was definitely mothers. It was not fathers.
100% mothers. And they said comics are causing our children to be violent and do all these things. So they went and they had to, your comics had to go through an approval process. And so they had to take, that's when Batman and stopped killing people, and it started turning into all these zany, like, oh, Joker's got a giant pumpkin bomb. No,
Yeah.
right?
It definitely got silly for a little bit. Adam West, everyone.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, well, no, exactly. Adam West is based on those comics. And so all we've really ever seen is Superman always being able to figure out a way to not kill someone. And we see that in a lot of our superhero movies, right? Like, I mean, there's some violence in Marvel that you're like, that guy's definitely dead. But for the most part, we see these superheroes always figure out a way to not kill. And so I think the biggest issue that a lot of people had with this, with not my Superman, was, well, Superman wouldn't have killed him. He could have figured something out. He could have flown up in the air. He could have done anything else. Why did he kill this guy? And so I think that was the issue. And I personally, again, like you, and I'm assuming, Chase, you probably agree if it's your favorite, one of your favorite movies, it was a good choice. And I loved the choice as a director for him to do that. But I could see if you're like, well, that isn't who Superman is, then.
But you know what's funny about that? I really enjoyed this movie. I thought the way they did Superman and he had to kill Zod at the end, I thought that was it made a lot of sense. I thought it worked. I thought it was a really good thing. And I thought it was the right decision for him. But Zack Snyder did the same thing with Batman and I hated it. I just could not, like in Batman versus Superman, Batman is just shooting guns at all these people. And that, for some odd reason, like, I don't know, it just felt different. I did not like that they had Batman just shooting machine guns and shooting rockets at people, but Superman, can snap Zod's neck. And so I don't know, like, and maybe it was because I don't, they definitely didn't develop Batman nearly as much. But
well, in those guys he's shooting him at, you don't. At no point are they like, I am going to make it my life purpose to make people suffer, to punish you because you killed Chris.
He's not about to kill a family with laser vision.
Well, and Zod's basically promised, you hear him before that big battle breaks out go, either you die or I die. Like, he's like, I'm never stopping. So
he literally says that.
No, that's what I'm saying. He said that. So it's like,
one of us will die.
That sets up the thing of like, he doesn't have a choice. Like, this is just one of the many other families he's going to endanger if he continues doing this, because he's on this rampage. Chase, initial thoughts before I go into some of the segments I want to kind of cover on Man of Steel?
Yeah, I really love this movie. This one was my suggestion. And mostly because my claim is that this is better than any of the Marvel superhero movies. I watch all of them, and
so in the comments, you will have to decide whether you agree or not with Chase on this.
Oh,
he'll battle
everyone
you.
will heavily disagree. It's okay.
I don't know if I'll quite agree. I do think there are some really, like, I think some of the Captain America ones were really good. I thought Civil War was good and had some stuff.
They're okay.
But
Chase passively says that's.
I don't hate all of them. I do agree. Some of them were a lot better than others.
But this is your favorite.
I just think this one as a whole, like, I enjoy this a lot more. The style of it.
Yeah.
But
and it was really complex,
especially the story with his like two fathers. I think that's really powerful in this movie.
And I do want to get into daddy issues. Yeah. But
one thing I'll say that when you started, when you're talking about the music and how we were talking about that, how it's shot. When this came out, I was living down in SoCal and I was at my cousin's house in LA, and this movie had one of the best trailers because it was just like shots of him like flying through the clouds. It was, and they had the score. And my cousin's a really good musician. He went to Berkeley in Boston, the College of Music. And I remember we were watching the trailer and we were really excited about it. And he cut his own like score to it. We were sitting. I wasn't really doing anything, but he was like writing, and we actually wrote really cool music to the trailer that wasn't far off from like what Hans Zimmer was doing. It was like really kind of like soft, like keypad type stuff.
Right.
And now I'm wondering if he actually saved that because it'd be cool to listen to it again. But yeah, the awesome like cinematography. I think
Yes.
for me compared to like the Marvel movies, I like the grittier shots. It's like a little more realistic. I mean, they're still absolutely like destroying the city like they do in the Marvel movies.
Gosh, that was
which
one of my notes.
It's
Was
kind of a pet peeve of mine. And
near the end, it's
like,
literally Metropolis is destroyed.
Oh yeah,
dot.
I do think it worked better in this one though. Because in Marvel movies, they're like, a city, it needs to be broken. But in this one, like, I felt like it made a lot of sense. And we'll talk about this later. I felt like it was part of the character development for Superman.
Well, also in the Marvel ones, I don't want to tangent on this too much, but I feel like they destroy the same city at least twice, like where Stark Tower is. Because at
least always New York,
and it's like rebuilt pretty quickly.
Insurance rates there are incredibly high.
I don't know what construction workers they got working in this Marvel version of New York, but I've never seen construction go up that fast.
No, I'll let you take it away. I don't have any more I won't give any more general thoughts because I'll probably just butt in when I have a point to make.
Okay, so I want to talk casting on this because it's been so long since I watched this, and I forgot what a star-studded cast this literally has.
Gosh,
so Russell Crowe,
his two dads,
Russell Crowe, and then
Kevin Costner.
Costner are his two dads, and I'm like, what more would you want out of your life? Is these two dads, right? You can't have daddy issues, Superman. You have the two best dads. So Russell Crowe channeling some serious gladiator.
Gladiator and John Dutton as your dad.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Then, and then we have the mom who plays Martha.
Diane Lane. Okay.
She's just phenomenal. Like
she's great.
You're just like, you honestly believe every moment that she is his mother, and like just even like little things like when he's talking about how Lois is like a friend and that she's kind of like maybe wanting to expose him, and like she's like, oh, that's nice, and like he's talking about maybe leaving, and she's like, you can see the pain in her eyes of like, I don't want you to leave, you just got back. Like she just knocks it out of the park. Lois, I think, does a great job. She's kind of got that scrappy attitude. And then obviously Morpheus as Perry White. Like
Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne. And then, I mean, there's so many of these other smaller actors.
Gotta say, Michael Shannon as Zod, I thought he did a great job.
Michael Shannon. And then
I think Michael Shannon's awesome. And he's the one who played Zod.
Oh yeah, that guy's great.
I thought I've seen him in a couple things and he does a great job acting, and I thought he knocked this one out of the park.
He plays the guy that's dating Eminem's mom in 8 Mile. That's what I always think of. But I like how they gave him the kind of like Greek hairstyle. That weird.
Yeah, it's called the Caesar. I used to rock that.
I thought that was actually a cool detail for the movie because it's like he's kind of like this.
The war guy, right?
Yeah, he's kind of like, he's almost like a god of war kind of.
Which he's supposed to be. I mean, that's what he was
in
created
mythology.
to be.
So they gave him this kind of like mythological look to him. His very brutal looking get up and everything. Yeah.
And then Christopher Maloney, who's, I only ever really know him from Law and Order SVU, but he plays the captain who's basically with Lois the whole time. So like they have that dichotomy.
Oh yeah.
The bald guy?
No, this guy.
Yeah, the bald. He was bald. I think he was bald.
He usually has like a buzzed head.
Yeah, he's buzzed.
I liked him. I thought he was good too.
He plays it well. Like, I mean,
he plays a lot of characters like that where he's like kind of a supporting role. There's a name for that, but
yeah,
and that guy.
He's
that guy.
He's great. And then obviously Henry Cavill, just like,
oh my gosh,
so good. Like, and it's no wonder that Zack Snyder's kept him through his whole cinematic universe that he created up until Justice League.
Can we reboot DC, but keep Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot? Because they both do great.
And I mean, it's just Henry Cavill, just so much in this is just like, he's
first of all, the man is like really 6'5" and just a hunk.
Massive.
He's got the hair.
He's jacked out of his mind.
He was a great choice. And who would have thought, watching the old Count of Monte Cristo movie that I hope we do sometime, that would be Superman? I mean, he's much younger.
Well, and this is before he in
and that's the last thing I knew him from.
This is before his Mission Impossible days where he reloads his arm, which I think is still the most epic move you can do is reload your biceps.
That was cool, but I'll tell you what, that movie helped to ruin the first installment of Justice League because of that movie and his mustache. They had this
fiasco,
stupid CGI face, and it was just
it
ruined that movie.
That wasn't Henry Cavill's fault, but
no, it wasn't.
He's just slaying this whole movie, like everything. And
he's a great Superman.
And the kid actors they got to be him like are believable. That's the other thing. Like I know you can't always get kid actors to look like the people, but it's like his like teenage him, the one that like saves the bus, looks like baby Henry Cavill.
He does. He looks. It's never unbelievable. It's the whole time. It just makes sense.
So casting wise, just like this thing is action packed, and like every time you like literally just get to a next scene, you're like, oh, I know that guy because he's also in this other thing. Like just so many great people. So Zack Snyder or whoever his casting department was, just like killing it all the way across. I want to kind of talk through some of the big moments in the movie, and these will maybe bring in some segments, and then we'll kind of talk about thematics as we're going. But the whole segment at the beginning where they're on Krypton. Oh my!
I was hoping you started with that because I have a lot.
Well, it's at the beginning, so I figured that would probably be the best place to start. But I'm always going to notice the VFX, and so as a whole, this movie's CGI holds up pretty decent, even in today's day and age. So this movie's almost 10 years old. CGI was not where it is now, but for the most part, they were doing some of the stuff, and I'm going to talk about this later when we get into some of the action scenes later. They're doing stuff that is like pioneering what we now do as like standard practice now, and it still looks good. But the shots where Russell Crowe is coming out into Krypton are just gorgeous. Like they've created this whole landscape, and I mean it's blowing up most of the time you see it because it's either at war or dying. But the whole time it's just like so gorgeous, and you want to know more about it. Like that's the best thing you can do in visual storytelling. It's like there's a whole story just there, but it's all on fire right now. But I wish I knew more.
Did you notice something though about the landscape? And this is one thing I really want to talk about that I think Zack Snyder, I think one of the reasons this movie is so good is because he tried to layer in a lot of things. And I don't want to just say them all up front. Well, we'll work through them a little bit. But what did you notice about Krypton, the landscape that you just talked about?
It's completely desolate.
It's all dead. The only life we see besides the humans is the one animal that he flies to the Codex and back from.
Yeah, and that dies, and he just like leaves on the landing pad. Like he hops off after it slides on the floor.
And it is just like... It is a dead planet, and that's not always like canon. I've seen Supermans where Krypton was a planet, or it was thriving, or it was good.
And then it randomly gets like
this is a
up.
Dead society, and I think that's a really important part of the development and of the movie. I think that's a very purposeful choice, and I really appreciated it to see contrast the deadness of Krypton with when we get to Earth later, the greenness and the lush. It's in Kansas. It's green.
Well, and you see again
corn.
Winter wheat in Kansas. Thank you, Chase. Okay.
They even kind of parallel this ideology even when he makes the choice whether he's going to let the terraforming machine go or not. He's like, Krypton had his chance. And it's like, you see what they did with their chance. They completely ruined their planet. He's like, why would I give them another shot, right? It's like that.
Well, they destroyed it. And then the other thing, you know, him being the first natural birth in centuries, you know, that's
the pod babies thing. I want to talk about pod babies. Okay. How do we feel about pod babies?
I loved what they did with Krypton in this, because in so many Kryptons that I've noticed or seen, it's like, oh, Krypton was this thriving thing and it just randomly blew up. And it's like, okay, so there's this awesome technological civilization that just randomly blows up. But this one was like, you know, he was saying, look, Krypton was dying. They were killing themselves. They blow up the planet because they're sucking off the core. They're slowly destroying it, and they killed themselves. And what I liked about it too is that, you know, they looked inward. They stopped exploring. They stopped risking things.
Yeah, they have all these like colonialist vibes of like they're out like sending people all over the place, and then they just suddenly were like, no, we need to focus on
and then they come back and they stop natural birth, and they don't take any risk. Everyone is genetically engineered to be what they are, and they have their life path laid out before it even happens. And I think there's an important, you know, discussion that Zack Snyder's trying to put forth of this layer of, you know, this dead corporate or bureaucratic or whatever you want to call it. There's this dead planet of no risk and everything's planned versus Earth, which is, you know, life is teeming and it's random and there's chaos, but it's good and it builds beautiful things.
Yeah. I also want to throw out Kal-El's dad dies. Russell Crowe dies the same way he dies in Gladiator, with a stab wound in the side. I just wanted to throw that out there, that I thought I was watching and I'm like, hey, that's the exact same injury he gets from in Gladiator. So I did think that was slightly hilarious. I don't think that was intentional, but
But it was
funny.
awesome.
The-
Did Chase have any thoughts on
Yeah,
on the opening scene? Opening
No,
parts?
one thing I forgot to say in the beginning is I'm the local idiot. So sometimes I just watch things without a lot of thought. When I have thoughts, I have them. When I watch this movie, even still, when I watch the beginning, it's just kind of the beginning of the movie to me.
Okay,
it's the
fair
setup.
enough. Yeah,
I mean, I like you learn who his father is and how the context of that, which is great. His parents, how they send him away. But yeah, I didn't pick a lot of the stuff out that you guys did. I mean,
yeah. Okay, fair.
I'm glad to learn it and see where you're
what
tying
we're
it
here
in later.
for.
So
I did like how his parents are awesome. His parents are super, super cool.
Well, and I mean, we didn't really mention her, but his mom, like his birth mom, she
Renee
does a
Russo,
great. Yes,
another
Who was that?
Renee Russo.
Oh,
I
that
think.
sounds familiar. Yeah.
she does a great job of not wanting to let him go. Like that whole scene is believable. Like you can feel she's
A lot
not
of
just
tension.
like- yeah, like, and she's like, I know-
Understandably.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you get it, and it's like you understand that that's what someone would actually be feeling. It's like Zack Snyder could have very easily just glossed over it and been like, shove the baby in the pod, hit the button,
Go,
and
go, go.
you'll
But
just watch
she
some
wanted
cool
moments
explosion.
with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I love that. And speaking of the pod, just in general, I love the vibe of the alien tech, like the Kryptonian tech.
Oh,
key-
it's
the
so
keys,
good. It's
the
so
Keys,
good.
the spaceships, the
floaty
what you get-
thingies.
whatever you get to see of
Yeah.
Krypton. I think they did a great job of this like tech that feels
It's half analog because it's got like all the metal floating particles that kind of form into things.
like the
It reminds me of, the needle things you push your hand
Yeah.
into.
Yeah,
exactly that. I don't know that they have those anymore, but everyone else who's our age and older would know what we're talking
They had
about.
a big one at a museum we used to go to. You could like walk your whole body into it. It was like a
that's
wall.
Oh,
amazing.
yes.
And so you can go on both sides, so people
Yeah.
would be pushing it. Anyway,
I just think what I hate is when alien tech doesn't make sense. Like you look at alien tech in movies and you're like, that doesn't look like something that an advanced civilization would actually use. Like it looks cool, but it's completely unpractical.
Yeah.
This one, I feel like a lot of the stuff they were doing, like, oh, yes, that makes sense that
It's
that
efficient.
it would look like that. And it has a unique look. It doesn't just look like, I mean, they could have easily gone and tried to do like an Avengers knockoff version or whatever. And Zach's CGI guys were like, no, this is kind of the vibe. His art team made something that felt
It's a little
unique.
brutalist too.
Yeah.
It's a little brutal, and I think that does really well, and it makes sense for the society and culture that they have.
I'm having such a hard time not referring to Dune's tech right now.
Oh my gosh.
Dune's going to be a whole
Guys,
other thing.
just a heads up, when we do Dune, this
Strap in
podcast
for
will be like
4 hours.
4, maybe 6. Like it's going to be
We'll do it in real time
And
with the movie.
Dune for the three of us actually has a really fun history because Zach had never read or known Dune until
I'd heard of it.
And he had heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes, it is one of his.
my dad
books,
was a
but
big fan, and he was like, I saw one time on TV, he was watching the 80s movie, which is great, but bonkers.
We
And
watched it here.
We did. It
right
was
before
awesome.
we saw.
But then
the new
Chase
one.
loaned me the book.
Yeah.
And I read the book.
My
and
favorite book. I was like, you have to read this.
It was awesome.
We're going to be friends.
So when we do Dune, that
gonna
was
be
going to
great.
be
will
we're
do
just
it.
going to do a live reading of the book and talk about it as we read it.
So I want to move on to the next section, which I kind of break down into the like, it's a series of his life on the planet. Because basically we see him fly in on a spaceship, it crashes in the cornfield, and then it cuts to him being on an oil rig, right?
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
like,
that's
a,
a good
he's
point,
like
yeah.
a hitchhiker.
Yeah,
Or
and
a
so
fishing boat.
What I like,
boat, right?
what I like to call this segment is a Deadliest Jobs montage featuring Henry Cavill, because he literally goes
Not
and
deadly
he-
for him.
He goes and he's like a logger for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, other than like he's a waiter at one point, but I mean, I don't know. That can be a little
Wait,
sketchy.
when you say
attacked.
logger, do you mean when he takes the guy's logs out of his truck and turns it into a pickup sticks?
Okay, that part to
which
me
does not make
was
sense.
actually very uncool of him to do. Like
That
might
guy
be
was
that guy's
uncool.
Yeah, but you're gonna like that truck is worth what $100,000-$200,000. I mean, he may have destroyed that guy's livelihood. I'm just saying
He's got insurance. It'll be fine.
Oh gosh,
He had it coming.
for an act of God.
Yes.
Okay,
He's on an oil rig.
well, he's on a boat. He's
saves the
doing
people on the
fishing.
oil
He's on a
and
boat.
then
Yeah,
he
he's doing
sees,
Deadliest
so he-
Catch
yeah.
stuff, which is what inspired this segment's name, which was
Yes.
Deadliest.
That guy's really concerned that he's going to get crushed by that cage.
Yeah, and then
Look out.
he goes and
Oh,
saves. He goes from Deadliest Catch to save, like basically a firefighter on an oil rig. Again, another deadly job, right?
Awesome scene.
Yes, except and throughout this whole thing, so he does the oil rig, and then he falls into the ocean and has his first flashback. I do have one major issue.
Okay.
One, like, I just hated it as soon as I saw it. The oil rig scene is so good, other than when he walks up to let the people out of the bulkhead and he's on fire. Like, his chest hair is, like, on fire but not on fire.
I think his clothes were burning.
They were.
Off. They were in the process of burning off.
It was very weird. I did not like it.
Well, it kind of turned him into the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, a little bit.
He's like in his shorts still. But
And I do like that his clothes were actually, like, melting with the fire. Like, I thought that was a thing that a lot of directors...
There's
though,
a
I
rated
get
R
it.
version where he comes through that door naked.
Yeah, right?
You know Zack Snyder filmed it too.
Yeah.
I want to see that.
So he has his first flashback, and he kind of intercuts all of these, like, deadliest job montages with he's doing a thing, and then there's a flashback to his childhood where you're learning a little bit what it was like growing up and him having all these issues. And this whole segment is really just kind of going, he's trying to stay under the radar. You constantly see him doing these jobs, but
he can't help.
He can't help saving people,
yeah.
right? And then we see him growing up where, he first discovers his power and has this whole anxiety attack and hides in the closet, and he's saving people on the bus when the bus flips off the bridge. And we see all these different things. And so it's a good parallel of, like, he's constantly kind of having this back and forth. And then obviously Kevin Costner is telling him, don't use your powers. Everyone's going to hate you, right? Or they won't understand you. And so it's like, there's just this really great back and forth. And there's just so many great quotes in this. Some of the things I love the most is, one, I like the X-ray vision, how they depict it, because we usually just see, like, the bones thing and, like, it, like, phasing in and out of musculature and stuff. I think was a nice touch as opposed to just doing the easy, like, I can see your bones kind of a thing, right? There's some great, the drip feed back and forth of, like, here's a little bit of him in the future, here's a little bit in the past, because they could have very easily done all of the stuff in the past.
It's nice that it's intermixed.
Yeah, and I think that was a great choice editing wise.
And they end it with a flashback that is an awesome shot of him as a child and his parents watch him. He's got the cape on. And he's like,
and we're going to talk about that shot.
It was kind of a meta moment, actually, because he's got, like, a Superman cape on.
That is literally one of the best cinematic. I have that written down. Like, I watched that last
It's a great
scene.
ending.
It's just cinematically gorgeous. Like, that could have just been,
that was part of the trailer that they used that.
There's like a haze to it too.
Yeah, and this is very Zack Snyder-y.
Cool.
Like, he's got a lot of bloom, a lot of haze, a lot of oranges, and lens flares. But that
not as many lens flares as JJ, right?
No, that's true. But that whole segment at the end where he's with the dog and the parents are watching, and they're quoting over the top of it, voiceover. It's just like cinematic perfection. Like, the whole movie's worth just watching that segment, honestly, in my opinion. But I did want to talk about, there's some great moments that are just quotes that I wrote down as I was listening. So Jonathan Kent says at one point, people are afraid of what they don't understand. And we see that kind of thematic come up multiple times throughout this. I mean, it's really not till the end that people really accept him. And that really plays into his trust. And
you know what's interesting about
this
that?
Man is not our enemy.
Yeah.
What's the second? The sequel to this was Batman versus Superman, right?
Right.
And what does Bruce Wayne think? He doesn't understand it. He sees the power and he makes a plan to destroy it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So Bruce Wayne is exactly what Jonathan Kent says.
Correct.
If Superman is a Christ metaphor, what does that make Batman?
I mean, Batman's not Satan. Come on. Batman's awesome. Batman's the best we've got. So we're not going to talk about Batman here. Maybe Ben Affleck is Satan. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, Ben Affleck. Batman's had its own storied history of actors and who's good and who's bad. I loved the scene just as we start moving on to the kind of, we're going to get into the deep dive, but the scene where Martha's talking him out of the closet after he's had like his first meltdown, I think is such a, like, it's her just like nailing it.
It's great development for both characters.
Yeah,
you see how he grew up and how it was difficult. You know, you also see that when he's getting bullied and he has the fence that has a dent because he was grabbing it so hard because he didn't want to fight back.
And this phrase that she uses, or he says, the world's too big. And it's like, that can feel like people go through that on a daily basis. Like there's just these moments where it's like the movie's doing more work.
They made Superman relatable, which is just hats off for that.
Yeah, that's the biggest win in this.
It's also a great setup for later when the other Kryptonians show up and they don't know how to deal with it. And you see how he's been nurtured by parental figures.
We'll talk about that because I did not love that part.
Well,
but we'll get to that later, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good point that you bring up.
So after this point, we basically we meet Lois. They meet in their ice cave, have a little bit of a cute meet as she's battling for her life against the little
It's the
droid
classic
thing.
rom-com setup.
Yes, the classic rom-com setup. He finds out who he is. Russell Crowe kind of talks about the history of Krypton, what's going on, and then he finally the deadliest jobs montage was basically him going out trying to figure out who he is, right? And so
And now he knows.
He finds out, goes home. Martha's there, and just about that time is when Lois also kind of finds out who he is.
Yeah.
She detects her way.
my first pet peeve of this movie,
Is her finding out who he is?
when she follows him into that ice cave and she's like precariously hiking around the side of that cliff in ice. It's ridiculous.
Yes, that's a little ridiculous.
It bothers me.
Yeah, I agree.
That's fine.
That is to chase to Henry Cavill's chest hairs being on fire to me. So
Yeah.
we all
Yes.
get a couple.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll have mine later.
Yeah.
So we get to this point, and then we start kind of seeing the next big threat, right? So it's like,
Can we pause really quickly?
yes, go.
One thing I did love about this movie, Lois Lane is actually a good reporter. Like, I feel like I've seen her so much. It's like, she's a great reporter. And then
she literally
and then
can't
she
figure
literally
anything
does
out.
nothing, and she's just there, and she has no thought process. And this, she's already written a great story. She's got some cred, but not, she's still fighting with her editor. She's following these things. She tracks him down. Like, I thought, seeing her as a really good journalist was kind of refreshing, and I appreciated it. So,
Well, and I think her relationship with Perry is nice too, because usually Perry just gets like, he's just the angry guy, but it's like you see him being like
a good editor.
a good editor for one, and being like, no, you can't run this crazy story.
Yeah.
Are you insane? But two, like, he's also kind of a mentor / like, he does care about her. It's not just because he's like, my guys are telling me I should sue you, and he's like, 3 weeks leave, and then he's like, I know you're dropping this for more than one. Like, he's more than just this like throwaway character, which he very easily could have been.
Well, like you said, everyone in this movie is casted really well.
Oh my gosh, it's so
they,
good.
They bring it. Every single person brings it.
So once we get through this point, we basically get Zod's return, right? So Zod comes back, where the movie does like a hard 180 and turns into a horror movie for about 5 minutes, where because the lights all shut off and like Zod takes over the airwaves.
It's like The Ring.
Yeah, I was like, did I turn on the wrong movie? Like, it literally just hard pivots.
That part
to
was
this,
awesome.
Like, scary. You're trapped in the house and this voice you can't understand, and the screen's all glitchy, and then all of a sudden at the end of it, the lights click back on. She drops something, and or the light bulb pops, and it's like, okay, that was the 5-minute Zack Snyder horror movie that you've been waiting for, and he's over it.
That scene, there's like that moment where it's like staticky, but you hear stuff. Because when the movie starts, they're in Krypton and they're speaking the King's English.
Right.
And obviously on Earth we speak English, but they might, do they speak English on Krypton? Really? I don't know. And so that scene was kind of interesting. It was almost like they're figuring out what Earth speaks to translate. And I don't know how that figures later, but that's what that scene kind of felt like to me. It was kind of cool. It's like aliens have just arrived and they're trying to figure out how to communicate with us. So it's like this algorithm they send out, and it's like, all right, we found it. All right, now we know their language, and then they all know it and speak it. But
so I did actually. There was one thing I skipped that we have to. So before Zod comes back, Superman takes the spaceship that was down in the Arctic that him and Lois got met in, and he takes it to the North Pole.
Yeah.
And Russell Crowe gives him the debrief or whatever, and then he gets his super suit. And we see, and the name of the song at this point is called First Flight, but it's literally his first flight. And it's like really when the music is just making you, it's the one that they use in the trailer.
It's a great scene.
It's so good. And it's like you get this moment where it's so epic. You feel it. You're like, oh yeah, he's going to take off. They intersperse some comedy in it because he fails and like crashes.
Epically fails through a mountain. Which is cool. But they don't make it too funny.
Yeah,
which is
but
good.
it's just enough to be like,
yeah.
And then
Oops.
he gets back up again and tries again, and it's so much a perfect summation of this whole movie of like, you have to get back up. It's the thing Jonathan's constantly teaching him, and the build up to him actually like fully taking off and like really hitting it, and you get this voiceover where Jonathan Kent speaking, because at this point I think he's died. I think
he's dead at this point.
But you hear his voiceover and he says, "Give the people of Earth an ideal to strive for. They'll stumble and fall, but in time they will join you in the sun. They will come, and in time they will accomplish wonders." So actually, I think that was Russell Crowe saying that.
That's Russell Crowe.
But that
yeah.
voiceover is just like so.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, I want to go out and like save some people after this like scene. It's just like music, CGI, the visuals, the voiceover. Russell Crowe's just like voice acting his butt off. Like it's just so.
Should we have the
so
discussion
good.
right now about the difference in the dad's philosophies and how that affects him?
I mean, this
and
is
how
called
that
a
implies-
daddy issues
So-
episode, so maybe we should talk about some dads before we get too much further.
Well, let's talk about 3 different dads then, because we have Russell Crowe as Jor-El.
Yes.
We have Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent, and then we have Ethan Hawke in The Northman as King Galera.
We'll bring our first dad back in.
Yeah,
From
so-
the Northman conversation.
So I think it's really interesting. The Northman is much simpler. His dad is shown, the movie ends up telling you and showing you his dad is a violent man who likes to fight and is a warrior, and that's pretty much who he is. And he does bad things, and that's who Amleth becomes in a lot of ways. And in Man of Steel, it's more complicated because his Earth dad teaches him good values. He's growing up in rural Kansas. He's learning good values. He probably believes in God, all that kind of stuff. He's a KU Jayhawk
He does
fan.
believe in God because he goes to a church, which is a note I have to talk about.
Oh,
because
that's
it's
a good
little
point.
It's an interesting moment.
Yeah, but anyways,
I don't love I'd never like pastors in media because they never make them smart,
Right.
which is a problem. But
Anyway,
anyway,
sorry.
no,
Dad
that's
talk.
fine. That's fine. So that's his Kansas dad, his Earth dad is like, be careful, stay under the radar, don't do it, to the point, and he's so dedicated and believes that Jonathan Kent believes that so much he dies.
Right.
Be-
we see that
to defend
scene.
that.
Yeah, he tells him does not come and save him from the hurricane, which you always know
Tornado.
a parent's tornado. You always know a parent's going to die the moment that the kid has a fight and says, "You're not my real dad," or "I hate you," which literally happens.
Spider-Man.
Which 100% happens.
Spider-Man, all of them. Every single one of them.
But then we see Jor-El, who's like, "Get it, man. Have that swagger. Get it, man. You got this. And that's what Jor-El is. And it's really interesting to see. And I think it is interesting, and I don't know exactly what it says about the movie and the full implications. Jor-El is the one who's kind of right. Even though he comes from the planet that's dead and dying and it has no risk and everything's ordered.
He's the one
right.
taking risks. Like
That
they
is
did
true.
their natural birth.
Jor-El's a man. And then it's funny because Jonathan Kent is a little bit like Krypton in that. And Jonathan Kent is great, and he raises and does a great job as his dad. And it's not just, in the movie, Kevin Costner does a good job acting, but also in the movie and in every Superman story ever, Jonathan Kent is an awesome dad. And so this movie isn't saying he wasn't, but he does have a belief that is wrong. It is more in line with Krypton than Earth.
Where you got to play it safe. You have to just
Got to play it safe.
You need to know.
Stay under the radar.
A huge theme in this is choice, right? We wanted choice. We didn't want to. They had a natural birth because Jor-El asked the question, what if one of these kids doesn't want to do the thing that they're assigned for the rest of their life?
What if he could be anybody?
Yeah, and it's like it's the same freedom we see, in Jesus. It's like everyone sees it as, oh, well, if you just follow these things and the world wants to tell you as long as you do these things, you're going to be happy. And it's like, well, actually, no, you actually are more free through this.
Yeah.
It's a freedom that you unlock, right? And so Jor-El believes in that so much that they do the natural birth thing to break out of this loop of like predetermined things and following only what the society says is best for them. And we I mean, like you said, Jonathan Kent's not portrayed as a bad dad, but he's definitely on the like you need to.
He's a great
he's
dad,
worried
but
about
he
his
has
dad.
a belief that is flawed. That's untrue.
Absolutely.
I just like that the dads, and there's 2 of them, and both of them are good dads when dads get crapped on
That's a good point.
in everything.
Everything. It's always this
Homer, from like Homer Simpson to Ray Romont, like
They're all stupid
They're
and
stupid. They're
dumb.
pathetic.
Well,
they're weak.
we even see that in the Northman, right? It's like the Northman. It basically turns out that
I do love that he did love his son though, and they did show like a good relationship between the father and the son.
The Northman did a good job of showing
Yeah.
it.
Right.
A lot of these other ones are just like, dads are dumb.
Yeah.
Like that's
well, and it's like they even try to reverse that a little bit. They're like, you didn't know your dad at all. He was actually a whoring around, and he was a drunkard. And it's like, so they kind of tried to take that moment back where there was like, oh, he is a good dad, and he's trying to like get his son ready to take over, and he's playing and farting and burping. But then, like at the end, they're like, "Just kidding. He's not a good dad. He's a bad dad."
But I also think that that's probably part of the story. I give more leeway to stories that are, that's.
Well, he was a good dad
story.
to his son,
and he was a good dad too. But he wasn't a great man,
Right.
and that's and it's much more complicated. It's a lot more complicated than Homer Simpson being an idiot. So,
so. In parallel, so, we're talking about the dads. So we hear Jor-El during the first flight when he's really discovering his powers. We hear him give this epic speech of, give them something to strive for. They'll stumble and fall, but in time they'll join you in the sun. So he's got this idea of like, you can be greatness and you could pull people along with you to be great. You can push them to be great. And then immediately after that, we see a scene where Clark's getting shoved down, and he's like, I really wanted to punch him. And he's like, I kind of wanted you to punch him too. But he says, you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Good character or bad is going to change the world. And I don't necessarily think that's, as we're talking about dads and the way men are portrayed in media lately, I don't think that's necessarily just people with superpowers. It's like your choice as a man of who you want to be, good character or bad, can change the world.
Choices have consequences.
Yeah. And will it necessarily affect somebody in Saudi Arabia? Maybe not, but it'll definitely affect the people in your world around you. And so I think, again, we're just got two rock star dads giving the best dad advice on the planet.
It's awesome. And props to this movie for making Superman in this movie was not his powers. I feel like in so much media, Superman is his powers. It's what he can do.
Right.
In this movie, it's not what he can do at all. It's like he is Clark Kent, and oh wow, there's these random cool powers that he has but he's like, what the heck,
right.
And trying to figure it out.
We see him more restrained and not able to use his power more than we see him at full power, which you kind of have to do because otherwise Superman kind of just runs over everybody. Yeah. But he's very relatable in this. Like usually most people's issue with Superman is, well, he's just so good and perfect that
they call this OP.
Yeah.
Well, usually the issue is he has no weakness.
Right.
And I was listening to a review from, there's a podcast that's a little similar to this called Rewatchables from The Ringer. And they did a Batman one. And they, one of the guys was like, the reason Batman is so good is because he's all weakness. And he overcomes that. The reason Superman's bad is because he's all strength. And so there's no issue. But this movie did a good job.
Snyder figured it out.
He did. I felt like Superman was so real, and so many of the lessons that would apply to all of us, like the one you just said about who are you going to be? What man are you going to become? Good character or bad? That is for every single person on this planet.
Just to finish up with kind of our, this is a man's man, not in the like way that most media wants to like go, well, that's a toxic man. But they could have very easily made Henry Cavill shave his chest. But he has a
hairy chest.
Yeah, like and he's got like you can see hair coming out from the bottom of his. For those of you who are just listening,
it's a masculine movie.
Yeah, he's very much a like I'm not the like prim proper everything shaved and groomed thing. Yeah. Which it's like if that's your thing or you just can't grow chest hair, that's fine. But they intentionally left him in kind of his natural state of
masculine.
Yeah, masculine, and I love that. So Zod basically comes over the airwaves. If we're moving down our segment, Zod comes out and says, you need to surrender your fugitive that you've been harboring. Yeah. And, there's this great scene where Lois gets chased down because everybody's like, she knows who he is. Yeah. And she goes on a whole FBI thing. And we have this amazing scene, but it's also a little on the nose where Clark goes to a priest to basically say, I'm the guy they're looking for. What should I do? And literally in stained glass behind him is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane begging for this thing to be taken away from him. I'm like, okay. I mean, Superman is kind of a Messiah parallel, but at the same time,
the archetype is strong with this one.
I was like, this is a little like,
it's too much.
This is a little much, even for me. I'm like, you couldn't have settled it up a little bit. You could have picked any other pain, but
Superman as Jesus is not good because he's not Jesus. He makes mistakes. He struggles with things. So
there's just so many parallels to the story that are just hard to ignore. You know, like he has a heavenly father. He has an earthly father. His heavenly father sends him to earth.
It makes sense. I would have enjoyed a much more intelligent discussion with that priest. because that priest seemed a little lost, which
yeah.
I get. And there's a lot,
Well,
normal people who are normal are priests and pastors and everything. But some of them are intelligent. And I would like just
It would
once
be
in a
nice to
movie
see.
for them to have a really good, interesting conversation instead of just be like, cool, go do it. You're amazed. Wow, bye. Like,
Yeah. And so I that scene was very funny to me. Like,
well, and
I
then
was
also when he flies off the spaceship, right?
yeah,
And he's literally
like
the
in
cross.
the
No.
T-pose. He's in the T.
Well, you got to rewind about 10 seconds because his father's Russell Crowe's talking to him, and he literally goes right before that. He goes, "You can save them all." And as he floats out, he does like
Yes,
the cross.
exactly.
And
It's so bad.
It's like
Hashtag, he is my Superman, but hashtag not my savior.
Yes.
yeah.
I love that. Let's make some bumper stickers. He is my Superman.
He's
is
not my savior.
That'll be our first merch. Okay. So from this point on, we kind of like really pedal to the metal. It kind of just turns into a lot of sequences of fight and flight and a lot of kind of action and
battle.
like just scene changes, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of see the power of Kryptonians going at each other. So I want to kind of put the rest of this into kind of like the back half of the movie segment, and then we'll kind of talk about the ending. This is where we really start seeing a lot of the CGI and the fight choreography take off. And I want to start this off by talking about how the fight choreography and the CGI make everything feel realistic. Everything obeys the laws of physics. So when the speed happens, it's a speed that feels believable. When he hits a wall and he's flying at Mach speed and throwing someone through a wall, he goes through multiple walls and then stops, like physics would actually do. When he picks up that U-Haul van to throw it at the helicopter, you see it crumple, and then when he applies force to actually throw it, it crumples further. And it's like there's these little nerdy things, but it's like every hit, everything feels like it has weight and it actually matters.
I thought the train was a great example. The train just feels like a train
Well,
flying.
and
It
it's
was
such a
crazy.
comedy moment too, because it just like comes out of nowhere. There's just this train
like, oh,
that
train.
flies.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons this is one of the first times they start using what's called digi doubles. So they took photo scans of Henry Cavill in these different positions, and obviously the other actors, and they made a CGI representation of them that in camera moves they planned for. Okay, we'll have him kind of start moving this way, and we'll whip pan the camera, which is when you move it very quickly and it kind of blurs, and then we can replace it with these CGI ones that allow you to do more things, because traditional action work in camera work is you use wires. And so, but the problem is to move someone as fast as they are doing and throw people like
kill
this
them.
would literally kill them.
Yeah.
And so this is when they finally started figuring out, and the technology got good enough that they could start doing digi doubles where they could basically replace them in and out of shots, and they just had to plan it out. So it's like, as these different things are happening, that's the reason it feels so good. But they also understood how to respect the law of physics. And I think we see a lot of our modern superhero movies, like a lot of it doesn't make sense. You don't feel it. Like, this is a very visceral.
I don't feel a thing when I watch a Marvel movie.
But
it
it's
doesn't
like every
feel
punch-
at all.
My biggest complaint.
Every punch, all the speed, it all feels
As a side note,
grounded in reality.
the speed was one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, Superman would be crazy fast, and the movement, he would be a blur. You wouldn't even see him most of the time. And so many movies are just like, oh, he run fast. And it just like looks weird. It's like, okay. But this, it was like just seeing how they almost teleport because they're so quick and so strong.
Well, and they can both do it, so they're simultaneously fighting each other at Mach.
It was crazy
speed.
and weird, but I thought it was so good. It made the movie, in my opinion, look so good, and it made it so you felt so that like it felt so real.
I love the reverse of this that played out in the sequel. It was like the better scene in that movie for all its faults is when the Flash thinks he's like hot stuff and he's gonna zoom around when they're all trying to get Superman and then
And
you
Henry
see his
Cavill's
eyes and
literally
Flash sees his eyes. He's like, oh no, he can see me, and he's like,
I would just run away at that. I'd be like, I'm out, guys. Bye.
out, bye.
Bye.
So that's one of the things that they really started utilizing, which I think is why this feels so good. The other thing that we start seeing technically as we start moving into this big action montage is this is one of the first movies where they start doing full CGI costume replacements. So if you look at for the video audience, we'll probably put some shots of this in. But for the podcast audience, if you're just listening, you see these mocap suits. They're not like the big like Lycra ones that you see them wearing, but it's like just like tracking panels on them, and they're just wearing like sweats and this thing, and it's kind of like the costume department going, "Oh, we'll figure it out later." So when the Kryptonians land, those big armor things, their whole head things, all CGI.
They look really good
Like
too.
through the whole movie.
Through the whole thing.
So like
I thought-
Zods and everything when he's like
Zods, all
at
of
the
it.
end when he
That's
Well,
crazy.
or like on Krypton in the beginning because he's kind of wearing the
all
same
armor,
thing.
all the armor, all that stuff
Really?
is full CGI.
That's
so they.
I thought
really
it was
believable.
practical. I
Yeah.
thought it was practical.
It's so
incredible.
good. Well, and it's like it's crazy because it also, I mean, it's a little bit like we'll figure it out later. Just like get
So-
some shots, and part of the way they were able to do this is because they started capturing lighting with cameras so that they could, and then he did LiDAR scans. So your iPhone 12 and up now have LiDAR on them, which is kind of like mini radar. And so, but back then it was a whole brand new technology, and so they would literally radar scan these entire sets so they could make full 3D sets that were actual, which is why when you come in and out of these CGI moments, it looks so good. Like that's the reason all this stuff looks so good.
And
is
that's
because,
why it looks so much better than Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern.
yes, 100%. Because they had this technology that basically came in right in the nick of time
That's
to make
perfect.
this movie.
Wow.
I guess we're lucky that this got made when it did.
Yeah.
At least
It ended up being
not
perfect.
sooner.
Yes, absolutely not sooner. But I mean, they kind of started this whole trend of like, well, we'll just figure out the costumes in post.
If
Yeah.
this had the
And then they
CGI
did.
of Matrix, the second Matrix
Yes.
Revolutions,
Yeah.
I would.
The
yeah, I
big
would-
stick fight where he's fighting all the Smiths. That looks horrendous. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is bad CGI. Well, that was CGI that they were trying to do before it was ready.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that was all my technical nerd ranting on that I just wanted to share because I think some
That's
of these
good.
things are
I did
brand
not know
new.
any of that, so that's
Yeah.
cool.
But so we're kind of into the big fight segment. My last thing is the knife duel anticipation when the rug gets pulled out, which later comes back. But the girl general and
A good death is its own
a
reward.
good death
Yeah.
is its own reward, and they're about to have this like knife battle. Like he pulls out a knife because he's out of gun or out of bullets.
Yeah.
This is the Christopher Maloney
Yeah,
character and the female general. And they're about to have a knife duel, and all of a sudden, like they are about to attack each other, and all of a sudden, like Clark just comes out of nowhere and sucker punches her. It's like the best like turn of like you're ready, you have this anticipation, and then all of a sudden it's just like boom, and she's gone, and then the train comes flying in and also hits him. So it's like it's a very funny joke because your expectation is something's going to happen, and all of a sudden she just gets like sucker punched out of nowhere.
Because he had previously pulled a knife out on her earlier, right? When they were down in the town.
Well, this is in the
Well,
town.
that's when
Oh.
he pulled the knife out. This is that first part.
But then on the plane,
Where
he
she's
does it again.
Yes, that's
Yes.
different.
Okay. But this is the
one
first time.
is so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so big battle. What do you want to talk about here?
Big battle. Just there's so much destruction.
Okay, before we get to the destruction, though, I want to talk about
yeah.
him destroying the terraformer.
Yes.
That so
I
you
had that as a
you
note.
had your the fire on his chest.
Yes.
You had what was yours again? The thing that you didn't like.
Oh, the
It was-
ice climbing with.
It was almost not worth
Oh,
mentioning,
her
but
ice
we were
climbing.
talking about it and
Okay.
it came to my mind.
The
Yeah.
thing that annoys the heck out of me about this movie is how Superman destroys the terraformer machine here?
He flies up into
He
it like
tries
Independence
harder.
Day.
Just
Yeah.
try harder. He's not being smart. There's no sacrifice involved. There's not like the full measure of difficulty. He's going, like that's it.
He's Goku powering.
I'm
up
just
is
like,
what
he's just
doing.
yelling. I'm like, come on. I really was frustrated by that scene because there's a million ways you could fly away from it and then like fly through it at Mach speed
Yeah.
or fly up and use your heat vision. But instead he's like, and I'm like, so that part for me was a little annoying and it doesn't
But
take
they're
away
bringing
too
the
much.
Christ metaphor further around. That's the day of Pentecost
Oh
where
my
he rises
gosh.
up into the.
It was just
Yeah,
so,
that's like that manufactured.
it was contrived.
But the music's
Yeah,
real
that-
good
where it's
during
like,
that. I'm just
I'm
throwing
being
it out
forced
there.
to believe that. So actually, on the flip, literally the flip side of that scene is something else that annoys me is that thing's like crushing the city on the other side, and you're like watching these cars get like compacted.
And the people,
And the
don't get
people are fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
they're
wrote
re-
that down as a nitpick about things that I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Like,
the cars
this movie
do-
could have been a great rated R movie if it was real, and they were just getting like eviscerated.
That would have been disgusting.
It would have
oh
been,
my
yeah.
gosh. So that annoys me. It doesn't. It doesn't mess the movie up too much, which I think is good.
They want it for the big soundtrack
But
moment.
I was like, I wish they would have had him defeat it in a different way, because that way to me was silly.
Okay, this is a good time to talk about this. This is like, and this might just be my ignorance to the comics. I was under the impression that kryptonite made Superman weak, not
Yes.
atmospheres.
Well, the atmosphere does a little bit. So it's a little bit of both.
Because that whole thing throughout the whole movie, as I've rewatched it again, I was like trying to find something, because I really love this movie. To me, when I really love a movie, I just tend not to nitpick them. I'm like forgiving if I just generally like the movie. But I'm like, okay, let me find something I don't like about it. That to me was, because it's kind of through, once Zod shows up more, at least, it's kind of this thing where it's like he gets weak in different times when he's like, he goes on their ship and they change the atmosphere, and then but there's no.
Well, the atmosphere is of Krypton, and so there's part of it that I
they
get.
set that up in the beginning, and so it on one hand it makes sense, but then on the other hand, his dad's like, we're sending you to Earth where you're going to be in the sun's radiation, and it's going to turn you into God, and he's still right there, so it's hard.
Well, that part is canon.
Okay.
So the canon on that is that the radiation from our sun is younger than Krypton's was.
Yeah.
And it's a yellow sun, and that radiation is just superpowers his metabolism and know all of his
and all the other ones that show up.
But
same with them
yeah,
too.
Yes.
But Krypton had a red sun, so it's not necessarily the air. So if they have like a red, you know how in Alaska and places where it's dark most of the year, they'll have like a sunlight thing so you don't get like depressed. There's like, you have to get the vitamin D from it.
Yeah.
They'll have those rays. So if they have like those rays inside, then maybe a little bit. I do think it's a fair nitpick though.
Well, and I do think it also could be like what their air is made up of, the atmosphere is made up of, like that could be part of it.
But
like
he
maybe
can go into space and he's fine.
And that was
so
my
that's
issue.
The
I
thing
was
that I'm
like,
like,
Yeah,
eh.
it's a kind of a tough one. It's especially when everyone knows that kryptonite does exactly that to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, where's because they bring kryptonite into the sequel.
right.
And so you're like, wait, because
Maybe that was peak.
if Zack Snyder was deciding just not to use kryptonite and instead change it to like, and it's like, okay, it's kind of hard to grasp, but okay, he doesn't want to use kryptonite. He's using this different thing. And
I think that's a fair nitpick is all I'll say. I think I get what you're saying. And I think
again,
that's a little bit
doesn't
of a
ruin the
weakness.
movie for me.
Yeah.
But it's a weird one. It's a weird thing when I'm watching. I'm like, I don't fully understand this.
It's the Krypton
And
vibes.
It does
it's
set
the
up
vibes. That's
yeah.
what it is.
It sets up tension and conflict. So I get it, but it's still. And then obviously, then you're at the same time it's hurting him. You're kind of trying to track how they can navigate, like, because they're actually technically they're fine. It just kind of overloads them. And you were gonna say something about that earlier.
Yeah, I don't like that Zod can figure it out in 3
So
seconds.
fast, he kind of just like
They try to
flexes his hand and then.
Well, they want to like hand wave it. They're like, oh, he's a soldier, so he's used to dealing with new things quicker.
Yeah, I would have liked more to see him struggle. And he struggled a little bit. Like, he gets heat vision through it. He gets flight through it and everything. Like, it takes him time to
Before
get
he
those things.
flies, he crawls.
Yeah.
Up the building.
Yeah. So they do show a little bit. I would have liked to see more of him struggling a little bit. Because one thing, we can talk about the destruction, and I think it's an important thing to talk about. But that there are parts of that last fight scene that annoy me. Yeah. You know, first off, Zod, this highly trained soldier, so highly trained that he can hone his senses in 3 seconds, can't get out of a headlock from some farmer from Kansas.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, Superman from Kansas.
and yeah, but Superman, the whole point of this movie, he's literally never fought somebody. And then he can just take Zod hand to hand. Like, come on.
Here's another weird Krypton's using earthly objects physics thing. Like, I get if another Kryptonian hits another, but when like you use something from Earth that can't damage Superman, you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't that technically be like him swinging like a balloon at him?
Well, but there's still mass. No matter what happens, there is in physics mass. Yeah. And so that mass still has momentum and all this stuff. Yeah. So it can still knock you around. It just won't hurt you as bad.
This kind of like ties into a pet peeve I have with lots of superhero movies that I understand why they do it, but I so distracted by it. It's when superheroes, when they choose to make them strong and when they choose to make them weak.
Varying power levels.
Varying power levels where it's like, you did that and now this is a conflict. This is a struggle.
I think they have a little bit of that in this movie, but I think this is one of the least variable in the power. I think this one is one of the best ones that keeps it close. It's not perfect.
This is just something I was wondering about. I was like, wait, would that steel beam really even... I could see him moving him, maybe, but like hurting him.
So the mass would still affect you. You know.
And the thing cuts him in the ship. That was another thing. I was like,
I did not remember
that thing with the
that.
arms when it's going to
The,
kill
like,
Lois.
droid that
Oh,
he
but
can-
that's Kryptonian technology, so I'm okay with that.
because it's like a laser whip thing.
But
right?
again, on Krypton, where they're not as strong as he is,
why do they have something that?
why can it
should be
hurt
able-
him there? That's what, you know what I mean? Like,
There is some questions.
I have questions.
I get there's. I think it makes enough sense, and I'm okay with it.
There's some suspension of disbelief, but
yeah.
um,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say something earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt. How did his family suit get onto that ship? Was that his family's ship? I guess. I mean,
yeah, that is a good question.
I'm
Why
fine to
is the
believe
L
because they just say they
armor
sent people
on-
out.
because that's from 20,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I've got to think that it
Just in the
was
family?
no, like who
Or
said,
it generated it.
Yeah, who says it can't generate it? I mean,
know-
it's,
I know,
it's
yeah.
this magic ship anyway.
This is
like-
not a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
This is a question because I
Yeah.
was like, it was. I was looking at. I was like, oh wait.
I mean, the
how did
suit
that
can
get there?
also withstand anything.
It's like
so-
Star Trek where they order
Yeah.
food and it just.
I'm guessing that's what happened. They got a 3D printer on board.
3D
there
printer.
you go.
Yeah.
They do look
With
kind of
fabric.
3D printer
They
like
do, yeah.
textures and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically from this point on, we're in big everything getting destroyed battle stuff. So we talked about the world engine.
Did anyone count how many buildings he flies through
all
at
of-
one
all of
point?
them.
No, I mean like in one throw. Like he goes through like 3 or 4
There's one where he
skyscrapers.
goes through like 7. It's crazy.
In the other part of this gritty reboot, apparently Superman does not care about killing civilians
And that-
in the middle of his
That fight
fight
scene was cool when all of a sudden Zod figures out how to fly and they're chasing each other through the buildings and it's
Yeah.
kind of like you're on a GoPro on Superman and it's like really really fast and it's like first person and then he stops and then Zod just sucker punch like sideswipes him.
Yeah.
That part was really cool. That whole scene was really cool. Just the cinematics of it, you know, whatever. Like
Yeah.
I
It was a
didn't
cool
really
choice.
care that things was getting destroyed. I felt bad for the people that might be around those buildings.
Well,
It was
and I like that when the
Ooh.
world engine's like crushing buildings, everyone in the Daily Planet's like still hanging out
Oh,
in the
yeah.
building. And it takes Superman getting thrown through the building next
okay,
to
it's
that
time to
before
leave.
they're like, let's go.
The same thing in Batman versus Superman. Bruce Wayne shows up. He's like, get out of the building. I'm like, dude, I would be taking my lunch break. It's like, you're fine. I'm like, you can fire me. You can be dead. It won't make it to HR. Like,
So, I mean, there's some really great fighting through this. I think it's some of the best depiction of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Metropolis is so destroyed. And just the desolation and the waste. We see where the world engine was. We see mirror images of kind of what Krypton looked like. It's just kind of a flattened
yep, that's what it's
What
doing.
city
right?
is Metropolis supposed to be?
New York.
New York.
I thought it was supposed to be something closer to Kansas, like maybe Chicago.
No, it's on the coast, I think.
Supposed to be New York. Oh,
Yeah,
is
I'm pretty-
it is, isn't
it's,
it?
It's kind of,
They
if
didn't
you
really
look at,
show an ocean shot. I thought maybe that's the lake that's next to Chicago.
if you look at the kind of the geography of how things have to work, it's kind of like a big, massive bay, and Metropolis is on one side and Gotham is on the other,
Yeah.
with Bloodhaven in between.
Oh, okay. See, I don't read the comics, so
I looked it up one time because I was
established
really
thing.
curious, and they're kind of close together.
Yeah.
Like, and you see that in Batman versus Superman, how he's in Metropolis with
And
Lex
then he
Luthor,
goes across.
and he flies across the bay to the port where Bruce is.
there's and it's not just this movie. There's like the old Smallville and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I swear I have this perception that it's like where he grows up and then where Metropolis is like not that far. Like we're going into the city.
It's not, but they're
Well, Kansas is very far from
I
New York
know.
City.
Very far from the East Coast.
but it's Comic Land. And
yeah,
so
okay.
do you guys have anything else on the fighting? Because I do actually kind of want to get into, you brought up Smallville, so I'd kind of like to start wrapping up by talking about, other
Wait,
Supermans.
so whenever I want to wrap up, do I just bring up Smallville? Is that
Yes,
like your
that's
cue-
our
did you hate it?
that's our that's our playoff music. When you start talking about Smallville, that's the cue to.
So I'll just say 2 last things then. One, I've not watched Smallville, so you guys will have to carry that discussion.
It's
And 2, I thought the fight scene, I think there are nitpicks with it, but overall I think overall it's good.
I thought they were
There's-
cool.
Could
dragging him
Zod
through
have
the
gotten-
ground.
Yes. Could Zod have been not killed? That's the question.
No.
I didn't care.
No.
You didn't care.
I'm
either
not
way.
like a
No.
comic purist or anything, so
No.
it made sense
He
to me.
couldn't have flown up with him and stopped him from nuking that family.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe,
but then
maybe,
Zod's
but
still
then
around.
what Zod's going to do after that?
No,
Zod's
I'm
pretty
just,
committed.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
agree.
just no. I'm
just
fa-
saying.
fair. I'm just.
Yeah.
I'd say no. How
Whether it was then
there
or
is
later, he would have
nothing-
had to kill him.
The only way Superman could have got out of killing him is if an experienced Superman who knew how to fight and who'd had his powers for a long time,
And all the
fought
tech that
him,
the future Superman gets.
and then knows how to use kryptonite and red sun radiation combined to lock Zod in prison. That's the only way. And he had none of that. And so I'm fine with this fight scene, and I think it made sense that Zod died, and I don't think there was any other way. I think that family would have died.
A Superman 4 throwback where he like this happened to Superman, not the other guy, but when he drives him into the moon, like buries him like a stake.
Yes.
That would have been cool.
Before we do kind of like a wrap up on just like other Supermans and how this compares, I do love the weakness you see emotionally of him just crying into Lois after he's killed Zod. Like, I like that he doesn't just like wave it off and
He's
goes,
crushed.
It's fine. And that she's there. I mean, the whole...
It's like his human side. Like, he just killed someone. He's grown up more or less. Like,
Yeah.
He knows he has powers, but he's grown up with humans.
I mean, he kills Doomsday
knows
in the
taking-
comics, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I don't
didn't-
have any issue with him.
He didn't grow
killing
up with
Zod.
some like meta conception of himself as a superhero, so he just killed a person.
And yeah. And I like that Lois is there for him. I think Lois has a decent amount of autonomy. They could have very easily written her as just always...
Lois was really good in this movie.
I think she, I mean, there is points where it's like, okay, why did she go? Why is she on the airplane? Why is she? But it's like they always gave her a reason why she needed to be there, as opposed to just being the running skirt girl through the building. So I do like that Lois did have some autonomy. She made her own choices. She very rarely was there just because some person told her she had to be
Why
there.
did they want her to come up to the ship?
Because Jor-El had given her the instructions on how to do the fusion drive thing. I mean, when it turned out that all she had to do was put the key in, that's a little less like...
He gave her that when she was up there, though.
Well, no.
I'm talking about on the plane.
The Kryptonians.
No, that's what I mean.
Her.
Why did they want her to go up to their ship?
So Superman, when he turned himself in, asked that Lois be there. Yeah. So my guess is that he made her important, and the Kryptonians were like, well, she's important, then we better bring her too.
That's
and they had
kind
no
of my
idea why.
perception.
As a hostage.
Yeah, that was kind of my perception.
Yeah.
But
And I like that the Pentagon guys are like, no, you can't have ours. You can have this one, but you can't have her. Like, I like that they weren't just like immediately like, yep, here, you can have this one too, whatever, right?
Yeah, they were like, excuse us.
It's like, you can have the alien. That's fine.
Yeah.
I did
I
like that.
generally like how they portrayed a lot of those guys. Like,
I thought they did a great job on pretty much all the character portrayals. I didn't find any that I thought were bad.
Yeah.
the this man is not our enemy scene was pretty good.
That was really good.
It's good.
It's good.
I do. So to end, it actually, like one of the last scenes before they do the like big wrap up with Clark playing around in the cape with the dog is him basically throwing a surveillance drone down in front of the
This is my least
general.
favorite scene in the whole movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I like that he's just like sassy about it. I think it's funny that he's like,
Yeah.
that's $200 million
fine.
worth of stuff. And then, but I mean, it is.
The drone at the end?
Yeah.
12 million.
12 million.
That's nothing to the American taxpayer.
Yes, you're right.
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, I do have trouble believing that they actually were able to track him, but I mean, I just thought it was a funny, witty little thing of like a back and forth of like, you're not going to control me and you shouldn't try. And then it's kind of that wraparound of the trust thing, which I mean, overall, we see kind of a couple of big themes in this, which is hope. Hope's kind of the biggest one that they're constantly kind of talking about. They can hope to be something more. You have hope. You create hope.
Your name means hope.
Your name means hope. And then trust. We see that multiple times throughout where it's like sometimes you just have to trust that people will do the right thing. And it's very easy these days to just assume that everyone's going to do not that, right? And so we see that, and then obviously our daddy issue segment, which we already kind of talked about. So to kind of finish up this first podcast, thoughts on other portrayals of Superman, or is this the best version of Superman we've had up to date? So we've got Smallville Superman. There's a new Warner Brothers Superman that's running around on TV that's got its own spinoff. We have Superman Returns.
That one was
And
awful.
There was also the original guy that got
Christopher Reeves.
Christopher Reeves. And so any thoughts? Is this the best Superman we've ever had?
Christopher Reeves those Supermans are memorable, but at this point they're like David Lynch's Dune. Like they have a special place in our heart, but we wanted a different one.
Okay.
And we got it.
The only other Superman I've seen, I saw Returns, which we're just not going to talk about. I've seen the older DC animated ones, like what was the Batman one, the animated series that was really popular.
Oh, yeah.
And then they continued that into like the Justice League stuff. I saw some of that. I thought he was good, but he was still, he was decently developed, but I'd still say this one is by far, I don't think there's a better iteration of Superman than this one.
Yeah, as a non-comic book reader, this is Superman.
Yeah, and you even brought up the animated ones, which I wasn't even going to talk about, but I mean, that one, he's like the most like Boy Scout, so unobtainably, like you can't relate to him. The Smallville one was basically a drive at trying to make him relatable. They're like, oh, we're going to show him in high school and I mean, it was in that, I mean, not that it's ever ended, but that like the what is it? Like the YA young adult, like love interest and the whole thing, like that's all happening in there. So it's more about that than it is.
And the fun thing about that show is that what pulls you into watching it is he gets his powers really slowly. Like he doesn't just have them all. Yeah. And so part of the development of the character in that show is him. You're like, when's he gonna get the next power? And you can guess, when's he gonna fly? And it does not. I stopped watching that show. I don't think I ever saw him fly in the show.
No, I mean it had like 8 seasons or something.
Yeah.
Like
So
that.
I don't know when he learns how to fly, but that first season, you assume, okay, by the end of the first season, he'll probably learn how to fly. I don't think he did. And
there's so the Warner Brothers has this whole like internal universe that they're running.
Yeah.
And they did a thing where that Superman actually goes into the multiverse. And so he sees the Smallville Superman and one of the other Supermans while he's running around. So it's kind of a funny nod to this before.
I do like the Lex Luthor in that show.
Yes.
What's that guy's name?
I know who you're talking about. He's very good.
Because he's also growing up with.
Yes.
It's like what's his name in Spider-Man?
James Franco.
James Franco. There
it is. Okay, well, that is kind of, unless you guys have any other thoughts, I mean, we've kind of deconstructed a lot of this movie and we've talked about some of the biggest things that struck us and what we like, dislike, and different things. And we also talked about the Northman, which wasn't even originally part of the plan. But
the one thing I will say is I have thought about it during our whole podcast, and I'm struggling to think of if we're just going versus Marvel. I think Superman is better than any of the Marvel movies. I think this Man of Steel is better than any of the Marvel movies. I think if we're bringing in the Dark Knight trilogy and the OG Spider-Man trilogy, we're going to have some better options. But I think I'll agree with Chase
MCU
that
does not.
That
I will
Man of Steel is
to
better than any MCU stuff.
I will concede to your contention.
Concede to your contention.
I don't even know what that means.
It means I understand.
Because maybe that's the name of our podcast. I concede to your contention.
Yeah, The Dark Knight is great.
And have you seen the OG Spider-Man? Because I love that one.
With Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, and I like it.
Okay, I have a higher regard for it than you do.
You do.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and stay tuned for our next episode whenever that drops.